Hello, and welcome to this explanation of what's involved in the SQE2 assessment. My name is Tracy Savage. I'm the academic head at BARBRI of UK programmes, and today I want to explain a little bit about what's actually involved in the SQE2 assessment. As I mentioned in my previous talk about SQE1, there are 3 stages to the SQE exam. You can't do SQE2 until you've actually sat and passed SQE1, and you will also have to have 2 years qualifying work experience before you can actually apply to be a solicitor in England and Wales. So let's look at what's actually involved in the SQE2 exam. Well, there are 16 written and oral tasks that you will have to undertake as part of the SQE exam. It is a national licensing exam, which is run by Kaplan and administered by them on behalf of the SRA. The fee to sit the exam is £2,422, and you will be paying that to Kaplan on top of any fees that you pay to a provider to prepare you for that SQE2 assessment. And the SQE2 assessment covers the functioning legal knowledge that you have been examined in SQE1, so it's the same areas of law, but in this situation you're being examined in the context of skills assessments. So it's looking at the skills that you need to achieve to be a day 1 solicitor in practice. So that's the level that you're going to be assessed at. There are no choice of assessments, so you have to do all 16 assessments that come up in your SQE2 exam, and in total it will last for 13 hours and 45 minutes. Obviously not without a break. That will be over 5 half days, and those half days will not necessarily be consecutive and might not actually be in the same week. So you might have the oral assessments in 1 week and then the written assessments in another week. So they're unlikely to be 5 consecutive half days that you are sitting the SQE2 assessment. And the skills that are assessed are client interviewing and writing an attendance note, advocacy, case analysis, legal research, legal writing, and legal drafting. And those are assessed in the context of dispute resolution and criminal, probate and administration of estates and property, and also business. So it's split into 5 subject areas, but the subjects are grouped together. So business is a subject by itself, dispute resolution and criminal are grouped together, and probate and property are grouped together. So you will be assessed in advocacy in the context of dispute resolution and criminal law and practice. And you will be assessed in interviewing in the context of property and in the context of wills and probate. So your oral assessments will be over 2 half days. You will have an advocacy in dispute resolution and an interview and attendance note in property on 1 day, and then an advocacy in criminal and an interview and attendance note in wills and probate on the other day. Then you have your written tasks, which are over 3 separate half days. So in day 1, you would have a case and matter analysis and legal drafting, legal research and legal writing. And of those 4 assessments, 2 would be in the context of dispute resolution and 2 would be in the context of criminal law and practice, but you won't know which 2 will be allocated to which subject. Then on day 2, you would have, again, case and matter analysis, legal writing, legal drafting, and legal research, and 2 of those assessments would be in the context of property and 2 of them would be in the context of probate and wills. And then On your final day, you would have a case and matter analysis, legal drafting, legal writing, legal research, all in the context of business. And those days, I call them day 1, day 2, and day 3, they could come in a different order. So you could start with business and then have the litigation subjects and then have property and probate, or sort of any combination of order, depending on how Kaplan are actually going to be running the assessments. To pass that assessment, you have to get an average pass mark out of all of your various different subjects. So the marks will be added together for all of those 16 subjects, and then you have to achieve the composite pass mark for all of those added together. So it's not that you have to necessarily pass each individual skill, although obviously that would be recommended, because if you pass each of the individual skills, you're obviously going to pass the overall assessment. But you do have the opportunity to perhaps dip down in one of those or a couple of those skills and still pass overall. And although you are assessed in skills, there will be a legal content mark as well for those skills. So you will have a skills mark and a legal content mark for each of the skills, and they will all be added together, and then you will have to achieve the overall composite pass mark. And that pass mark will be set for each individual exam after the exam as what should be the pass mark for a day 1 solicitor for those skills. So you can't say that if you achieve 50%, you are necessarily going to pass. It will depend on what the pass mark is for that particular assessment. You have to pass the overall skills assessment. So that means that if, when you got your transcript, you discovered that you had passed some of those and failed some of those, but you hadn't achieved the overall composite pass mark, you would have to resit all of the exam together. So that would be all of those assessments. So you can't concentrate on a particular skill and pick it off and say, right, well, this time I'm going to pass legal writing, next time I'm going to pass legal research, or whatever. You have to actually pass the whole exam, and if you don't, you have to sit the whole exam again. You do have another 2 attempts to reset if you do fail the whole exam within the 6-year period that you have to pass the whole of SQE. So that 6-year period would start from the date that you did your first SQE assessment, which would usually be your SQE1, your first SQE1 assessment. The standard is the standard of a solicitor on day 1 of their career in the legal profession. And the exam will be held in there will be different places where you can actually sit the exam. It will be held in April and October of every year. The first SQE2 exam will be held in April 2022, and then they'll be running in April and October of every year, subject to demand. So that does mean that there is a possibility that there could be more sittings available as more people are wanting to actually do those assessments. But at the moment, we can only confirm that April and October will be available. The written parts of the assessment will be administered through Pearson View Centres, and so therefore there is a possibility that you will be able to do the written part of the assessment at different places within the UK and also possibly internationally, if the Pearson View Centres will actually offer those. However, the oral part of the assessment is a much more limited location, and you will have to sit the oral part of the assessment, so that's the advocacy and the interview parts of the assessment, in the UK. There will be sittings available in London and in one other city in England, but we don't yet know what city that's going to be. Kaplan and the SRA have not yet released those details. And there will also be the opportunity to sit the oral assessments at one city in Wales. Again, that has not yet been confirmed as to which city will be used for that location. And the SRA and Kaplan have said that ultimately the oral assessments will be available in 5 locations in England and Wales in total, but they're starting the SQE2 assessments in 3 locations, London, one other city in England, and 1 location in Wales, but they will be adding another 2 locations to that as the numbers pick up going through for the SQE2 assessments, but we have no information yet of what other 2 cities will be available. At the moment, they are not planning to make the SQE2 oral assessments available at all outside England and Wales. So after you've passed the SQE2 assessment, which means that you must have passed SQE1 because you can't sit SQE2 until you've passed SQE1, you then also will have to show that you have 2 years qualifying work experience to be able to apply for admission as a solicitor in England and Wales. Now, that 2 years qualifying work experience can have been achieved at any point. So you can get your qualifying work experience before you start any of the SQE assessments, so even before SQE1. You can do the qualifying work experience between SQE1 and SQE2, or you can do it post SQE2, or in any combination of that. So you could have got some qualifying work experience before SQE1, some between SQE1 and SQE2, and some post SQE2. Obviously, it might depend on your employer when you actually sit both SQE2 and SQE1. So some employers are saying that they want their solicitors to have actually done SQE1 and SQE2 before they actually start work in the office. Some employers are saying they want people to have done SQE1 before they start work, but then they will do SQE2 either at the end of qualifying work experience or within their qualifying work experience, and other employers are being much more flexible. So it will depend on where you're actually going to be working, perhaps on when you do your qualifying work experience. There might be some advantage to having some qualifying work experience before you do SQE2, because it's likely that you will have done some of the skills which will be assessed. But even if you are working, and even if you've done your qualifying work experience before you sit SQE2, it is quite likely, I think, that you will feel the need to do a prep course, because it's very unlikely that you will have covered all of the skills in all of those assessment areas, because they're very broad assessment areas. So you might feel that you want to polish up on the skills in the areas that you're perhaps not as familiar with. So doing SQE2 without having the qualifying work experience is not necessarily an advantage or a disadvantage, and the same doing SQE before doing qualifying work experience before SQE2 will not necessarily give you an advantage, because for the qualifying work experience there is no competence sign-off. So to be able to use your qualifying work experience, you do need a solicitor to sign it off, but what they're signing off is that you have had the opportunity to do some of the skills that a solicitor needs on day one, and that you have spent the time doing those, but not that you have achieved any competency levels in those skills, because the competency levels and the skills are set out in the SQE2 assessment, and that's what it's designed to do, so that we have this national exam that everyone has got to that same level and achieved the same competencies assessed by that exam. So it won't necessarily be a disadvantage or an advantage to have done your qualifying work experience before SQE2. But as I say, it will perhaps depend on where you're going to be employed and what your employer actually wants you to do. So you'll have to speak to them if you have got employment, to see what they would prefer for your progress through the SQE1 and SQE2 assessments and how that fits with your qualifying work experience. There are more details of the SQE2 on our website, so please feel free to look at those, and also to contact us if you have any further questions. Thank you for listening.